The year's 2009. I've just graduated high school. I'm 18 years old. I've basically skipped the first year and a half of college because of all the IB AP credits from high school. I'm starting Cal 2. It's the hardest class I've ever taken. First day of class, we're all sitting there and this teacher walks in. He is a boisterous young guy, probably in his 30s. He's from Nigeria and he's very vocal and approaching math in a way that I had not seen done before with such energy, and basically told us this was going to be one of the most difficult classes we had taken, and he was right. Cal 2 is something that I don't remember. I basically remember any of it. I don't remember how to integrate or do differentials or anything. I remember that being a part of it, but I remember at the end of this class having worked through it. I'd never used a tutor before, and I had to use a tutor for this class just to try to keep up with it, basically. And at the end of the class, I had a 87 average. I had an 87. Basically, what happened was this teacher, his name was Choochoo, he gave us a choice. He said, you can keep the B, you can keep the B average, which I had only gotten once before in 9th grade English class from Miss Bice. Thanks, Miss Bice. But that had never happened before or since, and so he said you can keep the B or you can take the final and have the chance of getting an A, or you will potentially drop down to a C if you don't do well on it. That's how much the final was weighted for. I was faced with the choo-choo dilemma. What is up? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Zach, trying to help you be more successful on your path through medicine. You can learn from the blunders that I make along the way. So what I'm describing here is basically something that I'm calling the choo-choo dilemma, because it is something that comes up in our lives over and over, and you've probably already faced it at least once. It's essentially a scenario where you have a safe path and you have a more risky path, and you are going to be forced to choose which path you're going to go down, and that's ultimately, in my opinion, going to determine a lot of your success in life, is where your mentality lies and which path you are more inclined to take. Now, this Calculus 2 class was a class of about 20-25 people, and I don't know what everyone else's grade was going into that final, but I will tell you that only about 4 people decided to take the final. Most people were happy keeping whatever grade they had. So when it comes to trying to be successful, and however you define that is kind of a personal thing. For my own personal definition of success, I've really simplified it into just having 2 essential caveats. One, it needs to be that I'm getting to do something fun and that it's benefiting society at large or someone else in some way. If I can do those 2 things, then I'm considering whatever I'm doing and whatever I've achieved to be a success. And so getting to do something fun in life as a job means that there's going to be a lot of hard work that goes into it, because for me, stuff that's fun but also fulfilling and beneficial to society is not easy to get into that position where you can have that impact on someone and still actually enjoy what you're doing. But there's a lot of groundwork that goes into that if you're going to be quote unquote successful. I'm going to give you 3 kind of tips, 3 driving factors that, in my opinion, really drive you toward that success and that play back into making your decision when you're faced with a choo-choo dilemma. So the first guiding principle that I've kind of used throughout life is to choose the more difficult path. Now, when a path diverges and you have 2 options, it's sometimes easier to see which is going to be more difficult, but it's oftentimes not as easy to see the end destination of that path. And so sometimes you're making kind of a blind leap of faith in choosing a path that's going to be more difficult. In my experience, when I have a choice and I don't know exactly the end path for 2 options, choosing the more difficult of the 2 options, the one that requires the more work, has tended to work out better, in my opinion, than I think it would have otherwise had I chosen the easier path. So even if you can't see the end stage, the final goal of where that more difficult path is, choosing the more difficult path, just from personal experience, has always kind of propelled me to the next stage and led to more quote-unquote success. The second guiding principle, and it kind of dovetails off of that theme, is to choose the path of less certainty. I think when we get into medicine, because my channel is medicine focused, I'm gonna relate it back to that, but when we get into medicine, a lot of us are driven in that direction because it is a very secure, very stable, and very pre-planned destination of where you're going. You have very defined steps in the hierarchy of where you're going in medicine. And I think that security is very comforting to a lot of people who go into medicine who, in my opinion, as a larger group of people, are more risk averse than they are prone to take risk in a lot of situations. But I will say that choosing the path with less certainty has, if not led to more quote unquote success, it's led to more interesting opportunities, and it's opened up more doors that I didn't foresee. At least it's something interesting when you choose a path that is less well defined and has potentially higher risk to it, it opens up more gates, and it's at least a more interesting, more uncertain thing that you were going into. You were opening the door to the adjacent possible when you open a door that you don't know where it goes. So if you have two options, and one is the very secure option and one is the less certain option, but could also, bring big reward in terms of you being successful and getting what you want, having a more enjoyable career, and doing something that's more fun and interesting, I always veer toward choosing that riskier, more interesting option. The third key factor in driving you in the direction of success is your grit tolerance, basically your level of grit. There's a book on this called Grit, I'll link it down below, but it goes into all this. One of the biggest predictors of people being quote unquote successful and just getting farther in their career or their life is basically their perseverance and their grit. How willing are they to stick to something before giving up? And how many times are you willing to fail before giving up? The higher that tolerance is, the more you are willing to fail, and the more gritty you are, the more successful you'll be. This is probably the most important factor that's going to drive you to success. When they look at the aptitude scores of cadets that match into West Point and the academies, and they try to correlate that with the ones that stay in and don't drop out, there's not great correlation. What there is good correlation with is this thing called the grit score that is talked about in this book. The more that you can persevere, and it's not the people you would think always, the people with the super high test scores and things that are going to be successful. It's the people that can persevere and keep pushing through something, failure after failure after failure, that won't quit. Those are the people that will be successful. So that's the third key factor, is to increase your level of grit, your perseverance, your drive, and your willingness to fail. Be willing to fail and fail over and over and over, and not be afraid of that. So that brings us back to the calculus test. What did I ultimately end up doing? It was a no-brainer, basically. I was definitely going to take the test. If there was a chance of getting the A, I was going to shoot for it, even if it meant possibly getting a C if I didn't do well in this test, and a subject that I didn't really understand that well, to be quite honest. So that's what I did. And if you're wondering if I got the A, if I dropped down to a C, or if I kept it in that B range, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The point here is that the decision was made to take the test. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter if you fail when you're faced with a choo-choo dilemma. It matters that you step up to the plate and you take that Cal 2 test. You're going to be faced with a choo-choo dilemma in life, and it's going to be tempting to keep that B. It's safe. It's going to keep you from harm. But in my opinion, when you're faced with the choo-choo dilemma, take the test.